I don't really know that anyone at the Fed is being honest. So what they say in public and what they actually believe or maybe discuss in private could be very opposite. But if you take them at their word, then they are oblivious, right? If they are being forthright, then they're clueless. But to the extent that they do know how bad things are going to be, they may feel it's in their best interest not to let the public know, and to put a positive spin on everything. And I also think that the FOMC members probably think that what they say may itself have a big influence on the economy or the markets, and they don't want to cause what they're afraid of. So if they think there's a major economic disaster coming, if they think inflation is going to run out of control, they're not likely to admit that because they're afraid that their admission will end up producing the crisis that they think might be coming. And so they don't want to cause it. And probably in their mind, if they're really worried about a crisis, they think the best way to prevent it is to deny it and try to get everybody all optimistic, because I think they place a lot of weight on confidence and perception. But also another factor that's there is expediency, because the Fed is very political as much as they deny that they're political. And they're always trying to kick the can down the road. I mean, they don't really care if eventually the road becomes a lot worse because of all the can kicking. But I think from their perspective, a problem later is better than a problem sooner, even if the later problem is bigger, because Powell knows that he's not going to be Fed chairman forever, right? And, the president is not going to be there forever, ever either. Biden is, maybe this is his only term. And so it's, we just got to keep everything from falling apart until it's somebody else's problem. And so this is what I think the Fed is doing with what it's saying. Oh, don't worry about everything. We got this covered. The economy is strong. Yeah, we're going to get rid of inflation. It's a problem, but we're going to solve it. And it's not going to be a big deal. Yeah, there may be a slight recession. Maybe it's a softish landing, but, nothing to worry about. We got the situation under control. That's basically the message they're sending. Before, he was like, oh, no, we don't think there's going to be a recession. And then he was like, well, we still think there'll be a soft landing, but, maybe it will be a little bit more difficult. Maybe it'll be softish. And now he's like, well, no one really knows, right? Maybe we're going to have a recession. Who could say? He's like, it's impossible to forecast. And then he's like, look, even if we have a recession, nobody can tell if it's going to be a shallow one or a deep one. And, that's just not true. I mean, if he can't tell, then he's incompetent. And if he can tell, then he's just lying about it, right? Mm-hmm. But just from experience or from common sense that when you have these boom and bust cycles that are a function of monetary policy, you keep interest rates artificially low, you engender a bubble. You get a lot of speculation, asset prices get bid up, consumers behave recklessly, businesses, everybody speculates, everybody spends, savings go down, real investment goes down, now investments go up. So the whole economy gets all screwed up during these bubbles. Then when the bubbles pop, now we have to correct the damage. And you get a recession as, prices are, assets are repriced, businesses that never should have started go out of business. You have this unemployment as people lose their jobs at the companies that go away, and there's some transition before they get new jobs at other companies that start up or expand. So proportionately, the bust is in proportion to the boom that precedes it. So the longer the boom, the more mistakes that are made, and the deeper the recession that ends up being necessary to correct them. So given the fact that we've just had the biggest boom ever, as far as from monetary policy. We've never had rates so low for so long. We've never had this type of expansion in the Fed's balance sheet. So this is the biggest artificial boom that we've ever experienced. And it stands to reason that it would be followed by the biggest bust. Just like, we had a severe recession in 2007, 2008, following the bursting of that bubble. Well, this is an even bigger bubble than that one was. So if we call the 2008 recession the Great Recession, what are we going to call this one? Because it's going to be a lot greater than that one. Well, he's correct about that. Rates are not restrictive enough. In fact, they remain stimulative. They're just not as stimulative as they once were. And then that is a problem. If you think about it in the terms of a heroin addict, if a heroin addict is used to a certain amount of heroin and then you reduce the dose, right, that could be a big problem for that addict. But that's not going to get the guy off of heroin. Right? He's got to actually stop taking it completely. Mm-hmm. Now, that would produce an even bigger withdrawal if he were to go cold turkey on the heroin. And so that's really what the Fed is doing. The Fed knows that in reality, we have to get off the cheap money. The Fed has to stop stimulating. But the Fed is reluctant to remove the stimulus all at once. And I think maybe it's hopeful that if it just gradually weans us off it a little at a time, that is going to work. Right? So the Fed is still stimulating the economy, just not as much as it was. But I think that if you have an inflation problem, right, if you continue to fuel the fire, it's not going out. Right? They're pouring less gasoline on the fire than they were, but they're still pouring gasoline on it. So it ain't going away. Inflation is a huge problem. The Fed has spent more than a decade, cultivating this fire, putting all the kindling on it, and now it's huge, and it's not going to go away. And the reality is, there is no will in Washington to get rid of inflation. I mean, look at this omnibus spending bill that they just passed with big increases in spending. Where's the money going to come from to pay for all this spending? It's going to have to be created by the Fed. It's inflation. Congress has now decided that the way it's going to finance even bigger government than what we have now is through inflation. Inflation is the government's method of paying for spending. So inflation is going up. It's not going down. And ultimately, the Fed is going to reverse policy and go back to quantitative easing to accommodate these enormous deficits that are the result of reckless government spending.